Welcome, everyone, to the March session of Dr. Jaspersoft. Glad to have everyone with us today. My name is Mike Bilkowitz, as usual, and with me today is John Kano. We're going to be jumping into our session here shortly. Just a few quick reminders. If you have any questions that come up during the session, please use that Q&A button that you see at the bottom of your Zoom window there and enter your questions there, and we will address all the questions at the end of the session, if not during the session. And if you're watching this pre-recorded on YouTube or after the fact, you can always send an email to drjaspersoft@tipco.com. That will come directly to us, and we will respond to your email as soon as time permits. So we're going to jump in here shortly to our session. Very specific topic today: integrating scheduled job output with AWS S3 buckets. We're going to jump in momentarily, real quick. Whoops, just wanted to make a plug for next month's session. For those of you interested, we're going to be talking about clustering your on-premise Jasper Report server. Again, always the second Thursday of every month, so that'll be April 8th of 2021. And we will be presenting that topic then. So please join us again next month if the topic interests you. With that said, I think I'd like to introduce John. John, are you still there with us?
Sure. One second, let me turn on my video.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. All right. Good morning, everybody. I'm just going to go through this demo and then talk about how the setup works. Basically, what happens is a lot of folks have asked me for how do we get our report output going to an S3 bucket for various reasons, but mostly because they want to get the reports out of the repository database so they don't fill it up and make their system slower. So one way of doing that is pushing everything to the S3 bucket or to an S3 bucket. So let me go ahead and share out my screen and then I'll talk about how this works. Okay. Let's see. So one of the first things you need to do is generate some programmatic access keys. This is basically something you'll do on the AWS side. You may already have this set up. This allows you to connect to the S3 bucket through command line interface or through curl commands or Java, anything like that. But you need to generate those keys. There'll be an access key and a secret key. The next part is actually creating the S3 bucket on AWS. And then after that, what you do is you'll mount the S3 bucket onto your operating system, whether it be Linux, a Mac, or Windows, whatever you're running a Jaspersoft repository server on. The reason you want to do this is Jaspersoft already has the ability for scheduled reports to output the content of the report to a mount or to a file location. You just have to enable this, which is the last part, enabling the host file system output in your application context XML file. And once you enable that, you can actually write files out to the host system. It's disabled by default because we don't want people to accidentally start writing to the host file system. If you're not careful with where you're writing those files to, you could overwrite a disk that's used for the operating system or used for your Jaspersoft server itself. But once you enable the host file system and you mounted the S3 bucket, now you have the ability to schedule reports and have the output go to the S3 bucket. So I'm going to talk about that a bit. This is an example script. Obviously, this is just using curl bash. Actually, you can also use the same kind of script in something like Postman to do a test. But what we're doing is I'm generating a pre-signed URL to a bucket into a particular file in that bucket, which is the same name of the file that I'm going to output into the bucket in a little bit. The only difference here is this is there's a little problem with this slide. It says that the base output file name is test. This base output file name should actually be S3 bucket. And if I show you, let me show you a different script. This is the script I'm going to run. You notice that the output file name is S3 bucket here. Because you want to make sure that when you generate the URL, the assigned URL, that it matches the output of the file, okay? Otherwise, you'd have to go ahead and generate the file first and then request a list of the files from the S3 bucket, get the name, and then create the pre-signed URL. But basically what we're doing here is we're creating a signed URL, attaching that into the message of the output. And the reason you want to do that, so you'll see in the message text, and putting the S3 signed URL there, is so that if you want to have somebody outside of Jaspersoft have access to that output, but you don't want to actually forward the output in an email, you can send forward the signed URL. Now, in this particular signed URL, I'm setting the expiration. I believe this is 1 week, so that after a week, the URL no longer works. The output will still be in the S3 bucket, but the URL won't be available after that week period. So once you actually run this script and you've output the report, or you scheduled it, you'll notice that you have scheduled it to the server. And you'll see that on the server, you're scheduling it to this location where you mounted the S3 bucket. And then also when you schedule it, you're scheduling who you want to send it to. And you'll notice that the signed URL is already in here. The signed URL is in here because when I executed the curl script to schedule the output to go to an email, I went ahead and updated that message text with the signed URL, okay? There are some customizations I've done for other clients where this gets all generated inside of Jaspersoft, and we actually modify the UI, but that takes some development effort. What I'm showing you today is how you could do this without changing Jaspersoft in any way, and you're using the pre-built capabilities of Jaspersoft, okay? Once you do go ahead and schedule that, the report will run in the scheduler, and then you'll notice the output is put into an S3 bucket right here. Okay, that output is now available either through the S3 bucket, but it's also available through that pre-signed link that you can send to anybody for up to a week. The output will never leave here until you delete it, where you set up policies to delete it, but it will put the output to the file, to the bucket. Then what happens is this email goes out to everybody, or to whoever you sent it to. In my case, I sent to myself. And you'll notice that it has the link because that's what we put in the message. And then it also has the attached outputs because I want the attached output for myself, but I don't want the link in case I want to give anybody else access to this data. But I don't want them to have to go through the Jaspersoft repository. I simply want to be able to give this link to somebody so they have access to the data. That way I don't have to send out this file because these files, even though this one's pretty small at 23.8 kilobytes, this could have been like a 20 meg file. And you wouldn't want to send that out to a lot of people in their emails because it would just, expand their, take up email space. So you might want to just send a link instead. So that way you have one output from the report job, but that output's available to everybody. So you notice again, that's where I set the link in the message. I'm just using a curl command to execute the posting or the creation of the job. And then I'm, getting the sign link by using the AWS client interface, the CLI interface on my server to generate the link. When you do this, you'll notice I am using, when I mount the drive, I'm setting it to the password file. The password file is actually just your access key, your secret key. Obviously, I'm not going to show that today, but that's how that would work. And then that way it mounts the drive, creates a signed URL, sends out the request to schedule it. The scheduler schedules it on the server, and then once it's scheduled on the server, the email goes out. All right, so I'm going to demo this, and all I really need to demo this is these two pieces, and this is going to go ahead and copy that. So you notice I'm going to go ahead and go back to here, window, local Jaspersoft. So right now there are no schedules in here. And also if I was to look at my repository, one second, you'll see that there are no files out in the, I'm sorry, if I look at my bucket, there's no files in the bucket. But now I'm going to go and schedule this. So I'm just going to paste that script in here, creates a signed URL, and then it's post the request to the server to actually schedule the report with the message. You notice the signed URL is now here. That's where the actual report is going to. If I go look at the server, and I go view the schedules, you'll see it create the schedule. Now the schedule is scheduled to go immediate. So if I go ahead and look at it, though, you'll notice the output is going to the location on the server, which I actually mounted the S3 bucket. Notifications is going to myself with the signed URL. Now that schedule's run, so it's actually executed, and you'll see how I got a email coming in. Oh wait, apologies. I forgot to do one thing. I'm not going to do it while I'm on the call, but the email. Let me see if I have it in my deleted items. I get one from yesterday. You'll see here's what the email looks like. So that's how it actually executes out to the S3 bucket, or creates the email. I disabled my ability to send emails right now, but that's what it looks like when it runs. And then what you had, same thing as what we got from this right here, this signed URL that was sent in the email. If I go ahead and use that URL and I go and post it into a screen, you'll see it opens the output of the actual output. Now that email, this signed URL is good for only 1 week. If you don't want it to expire, you can simply tell it not to expire, but you can't just take the expires off the link here. When you actually create the signed URL right here, just don't include the expiration expires in piece, and that way it'll be a permanent link, okay? But normally you probably want to go and put an expiration in there so that the file is not available forever. That way you have the ability to clean it up later if you want to, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and let's go back in the presentation. So what did I just do? I just did a curl command, execute a job. Whoops. That goes out to the S3 bucket, and an email gets sent to the whoever you want to receive it. They get the output of the report, but they also have the link that they can forward that link to whoever they want to have access to the report. The nice thing here is we're not storing it in the Jaspersoft repository. If you ever have to do a migration in the future from an older version of Jaspersoft to a newer version, one of the biggest problems is that your export of your repository is too big and becomes very cumbersome in order to do the upgrade. So in order to reduce the size of your repository, either you got to clean out the output from the S3, not from the S3, but from the job output that went into the repository, or you need to make sure your job output goes somewhere other than your repository. But if you put it somewhere other than your repository, the question is, well, how do you get a link? One nice thing is with this S3 bucket is you can create those pre-signed links and go ahead and send those out to folks. And then that way they have the ability to get to the output Jaspersoft, and also without having to actually fill up your Jaspersoft repository with all those outputs from the reports. And that way you don't have to clean it out before you upgrade in the future, okay? Just for informational purposes, the links for all the how to do this is down here. The links for how to create your programmatic access, your S3 bucket, how to mount it, and how to enable the host file system on the server. And just so you know what that looks like, when you're actually in the application context XML, you'll see that you can enable the save the host file system right here. Just remember, if they're going through RUI and you're not doing something through Visualize.js or through REST APIs to enable embedding of the Jaspersoft in your application, you're using RUI. This can be a little bit tricky because once you enable that, you're enabling them to save anywhere on your host file system. And if they don't know what they're doing or they save to the wrong location, it could fill up your disk space. So if you do enable this, make sure you're defaulting the host file system either to the bucket or to some sort of temp drive or somewhere other than your root drive for your actual application, okay? That's basically how you do it, to have everything go out to an S3 bucket. If there's any questions, do feel free to ask. I think I actually went through that a little bit quicker than I meant to. So Mike?
That's all right, John. So yeah, that's great. I did have one quick question, John. The expires time that you showed, is that in minutes? So is you have to do the math? Or was that the number you had was like 600,000 or something? Is that minutes?
60,000 something? I believe that's in. I have to double check. I do believe it's in minutes or milliseconds.
Okay.
I honestly have to go back and check and see what the
okay.
the
I was just curious.
is. Yeah.
And also, John, I was curious. Another question I had, and we do have one question here. I'll get to in a moment. But the another question I had was, do did you, if so you could do it via the UI to schedule a job as long as you knew that path to the S3
Yeah.
account, right? Just like
Yeah.
you showed us the schedule job, but you wrote a curl script to do that. But if the users were trained properly to know that, yeah, mount it to this S3 bucket, or maybe default that, we could even write a customization, right, to default the that box to the S3 mount or whatever. So they could, in theory, schedule it via the UI themselves, is right?
Absolutely. You can schedule it via the UI directly, as long as you know where the S3 mount is, or you go into the JavaScript and do a slight default customization and default that path to the S3 bucket's location. The nice thing though is you can, through the CLI interface, if you're running scripts, you can actually create S3 buckets on the fly, mount them on the fly using that mount command, just like I had in my script. And then you can go ahead and have the output go out there. So you can also create S3 buckets per tenant, for instance,
nice.
and that way every tenant has their own bucket. And so you could give access directly to that bucket to your individual tenants, or you could have just the signed URL. So they don't have access to all the report output. They only have output to that one, or access to one output.
And that means you could also use profile attributes if you wanted. Let's say you had information from your system, if you used a single sign-on in our system and pull the profile attributes over, you could put that access in that field as well.
Absolutely. So with profile attributes, you could either have an organizational level attribute for each organization as a bucket, or you could even have a bucket per user if you only have a small number of users. I just don't think from a cost perspective you want thousands of buckets if you have thousands of users.
Right.
But for organizational level, it'd be great. Or if you have a small number of users, you could have a bucket per user. Yes.
Yeah, that's great. That's good info. And the other thing that's good to note, we mentioned the customizations, like customization on that output page. And one thing I know I've done a lot for clients is disable certain options or whatever. But like you were saying, you could enable that host to file system, but you could actually make that a read-only field, so it just shows them, and the only option is to save it to the file system, but really it's the S3 bucket, right? And you could just make it kind of permanent there, so they see it and they know, but they can't go and write stuff like you were saying to the other places on their file system.
Exactly. You can set the default for the host file system and then hide the save the repository and save the file system through the theme, and then that way they can't see but it's hidden and it's defaulted, and that would always write out to the S3 bucket, especially if you use an attribute for the default, because that way it would automatically go to the S3 bucket for that organization.
Right.
Okay.
So we do have a question from one of the attendees. Remember, so the question is, I think I know the answer to this, but can we redirect the expired S3 link page to a Jaspersoft static page on the Jasper server?
So you want a page on the Jaspersoft server where it had all the S3 links? I think, and I'm not sure. You can do that. I do that. Yeah.
Yeah, as long as the issue would be the authentication, right? Like, if you're.
Well, what I would really do is have a JSP page that you can then put into the Jaspersoft environment, and then what have it do is have it use the AWS client APIs. So basically, from a Java standpoint, call back into AWS and get a list of the links available for that organization using their attributes. Okay. And that way, you don't have a static list of files. You have a dynamic list based upon what's in the bucket.
I think maybe what he was getting at is what happens if it's expired and they click the link. Can we have it auto redirect to a page that says this is
no, it's an AWS link. It's not a Jaspersoft link. So you might be able to set up rules in AWS, but I'm not sure how that would work as far as what happens when you try to hit a link that's expired. But what will normally happen is it'll tell you that this link is no longer valid, essentially.
Okay. Hopefully that answers your question, Praveen. Thanks for that question. Anyone else have any questions? Feel free to throw them into the Q&A section there. And I don't see anything else right now. And then you did show the resources slide. I just want to remind folks that if you're watching this recorded version of this and you have questions, send an email to drjaspersoft@tipco.com. And we will address that. I know some people put comments in YouTube, and we don't get notified when that happens. So so please don't rely on the comment section. Please just send us an email, and like I said, we'll address that as soon as we can. And then also as another friendly reminder, next month, the second Thursday on April 8th, we're doing clustering your on-premise Jasper report server. where one of our colleagues, Batter, will be presenting on how to cluster your JRS server. So if there's no other questions, thank you very much, John. I think that's it. We have a nice quick one today, and we look forward to everyone joining us again next month. So Dr. Jaspersoft signing out.